Welcome back to the week one, or I don't know if you want to call it week one because it's the conclusion of week one, but we're talking heading into week two. So whatever. 1 week of football in the Big Sky Conference 2024 football season is in the books for every team but Montana State. We'll talk about that later. But this is our Big Sky Podcast Network Power Rankings presented by Tubbs of the Club, which means presented by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. I'm your host for the night, Brian Marceau. Full disclosure, there may be a co-host at times throughout the upcoming year, but until we actually get Patty in the booth, it's still me. Some things don't change and some things do change with the Power Rankings this year. What doesn't change? It's voted on by Big Sky Podcast Network contributors, people from Griz Fan. We got R&R Catcast. I hope Weber State Weekly can get back to recording. They still vote in our power poll. So hey, shout out to Colby. Shout out to Chappie. We got media members covering Big Sky Conference football as well. We average out all those polls. That gives us our 12-1. I don't really care too much about the position of the voting itself. We're just going to talk about the teams as they land. What's going to be different this year? For some of the lower teams, I'm not going to give them quite the energy that I historically did. So question is why? Not to be flippant. In fact, I want to try to give them mostly each team a little bit more credit as needed. But just full disclosure, guys, whenever a show starts, it's easy to go on about your first topic, and the teams we all care about are at the end. So I think I'm going to say if you're a lower team, you got to prove you're intriguing, or if I find something intriguing right away, then we'll land there. But when I talk about teams that are not intriguing, that's where we get to start off with. So, hey, number 12, we have Cal Poly, your Cal Poly Mustangs. And look, we're barely going to talk about this at all. Cal Poly loses at San Diego. At San Diego, hey, look, San Diego, non-scholarship San Diego, absolutely terrible. Yeah, sure. The game's close. Patty, I see in the comment section, as you could join audio only. I don't know how to smoothly get this to you running a one-man show. I will do what I can. So Cal Poly, they go down 27-21 to San Diego. The intrigue is, hey, Bo Kelly did start at quarterback. That was a reasonable question. Maybe a teeny bit more intrigue just on my end because I've been doing the show for a while. Bo Kelly threw three picks. Went 21-35 for 226 yards. Again, San Diego's not good, guys. This is not going to be a playoff team by any means. And Cal Poly could only come up with 294 total yards. If you're curious, hey, with year two of Paul Wolf, is the ground game going to be any different for Cal Poly? No. Against San Diego, they rushed 18 times for 8 yards. We are done talking about Cal Poly. Patty, still, I'll do what I can to get this into you. Moving on from Cal Poly, number 11, Northern Colorado. A teeny bit more intrigue to me with Northern Colorado because, one, on Tubbs of the Club, I said Northern Colorado is I think they're not going to be good, but I think there's a world where Northern Colorado could be maybe the best of the terrible teams in the Big Sky, or the best of the worst in the Big Sky. Their issue is last season, the Bears scored 14 points a game. Hard to win many games if you're scoring 14. Ed Lamb fired his offensive coordinator, right call. So, hey, we have new blood calling plays in Northern Colorado down in Greeley, but honestly, man, Northern Colorado, they pick up right where they left off in 2023. Yes, Incarnate Word is, generally speaking, Incarnate Word is, they're pretty solid in FCS. They've been good for a while. They're playoff type. You expect them to compete for playoff spot pretty much year in and year out. But Northern Colorado scores 7 points against Incarnate Word. So picking up right where they left off in 2024. Starting quarterback Peter Castelli, because that was some of the intrigue for Northern Colorado, is who would be taking snaps. Well, he goes 16-26, 141 yards and 2 picks. Now, I will say the Bears rushed it 43 times on the game, and they passed it 28 times on the game. So that does tell you, I think that tells you Ed Lamb is going to want this team to run the football because in spite of being down, look, I mean, at the end of our final game score of 28-7 is what it was at the end of the third quarter. And Northern Colorado didn't exactly, have an aerial assault to try to make up lost ground here. But we're about to be done talking about Northern Colorado. The question for the Bears is, can they do anything offensively at all? Now, they did put up 360 total yards. It's not awful, but the capitalization was terrible. 7 points. No, you're going to, I guess that picked up right where Bears picked up, right where they left off. And that's pretty much that's where we're at. So yeah, we got Patty in the comment section, still working to get him on there. Patty, I promise I'm working on this third team we're going to talk about. So hey, that was 12 Cal Poly. Number 11 we had Northern Colorado. Number 10 we have top 5 Portland State. Top 5 Portland State. Now, okay, this is maybe a little unfair to be harsh on Portland State. I have a preposterously tough schedule. They traveled to Pullman to play the Pac-2, aka Mountain West, for a year. Washington State Cougars in Pullman just got murdered 70-30. This was never a game in any way whatsoever. The Dante Sachere, starting quarterback, went 14 of 25 for 175 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Rushed it 12 times for 29 yards. Did come up with 2 touchdowns. So what? Hey, he accounted for 3 touchdowns, but the Portland State gave up 70. Who cares? Quincy Craig, running back, people should be aware of in the Big Sky. He's a name. He was productive for the Vikings last year. He goes 10 rushes for 54 yards. Also had 4 catches for 24 yards. So those are a couple names to pay attention to. But this Portland State team is going to have to run the ball. And look, Sachere is just not a great passer. That's how it is. That's the identity of this team. It's going to be a very long year for Portland State, as Patty says. Little to no faith in PSU. So, hey, why do you have little to no faith in Portland State? The Vikings have – look, I'm not going to go through the Vikings week-by-week schedule because it's Portland State. But the Vikings have, relative to being a lower team in the Big Sky, they have an incredibly, incredibly difficult schedule. Patty, I just sent that invite. I'll be able to see you soon. So moving on from Portland State, we have number 9, Idaho State. Idaho State, to me, there actually is intrigue in what happened for Idaho State this last week. So the Bengals, they traveled to Corvallis to play Oregon State. Is Idaho State going to beat Oregon State? Oh God, no, not a prayer. Everyone knows that. That's not meant as a put down in case we got McLean listening live. No, Idaho State and Oregon State. This is a purchased win for Oregon State, similar to the Oregon-Idaho matchup we're going to talk about later. So hey, obviously the expectation for Idaho State here is not, will the Bengals pick up a win? It's, what are we going to see some fights? Or are we going to see anything new out of Idaho State, Cody Hawkins year 2? This is a team, to me, I do think they're worth watching, and there was a little bit of drama in this game. Idaho State did hang in. In fact, the Bengals were winning at the end of the first quarter, 9-7, a nice high-scoring baseball score, combination of safety and Christian Fredrickson with a 35-yard pass from Kobe Tracy. And there, pause real quick. That's where the intrigue comes. Kobe Tracy. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you might be wondering, hey, Patty's about to join in. Patty, good to see you. Patty, do me a favor, say something, or I'm going to have to keep rolling. I can't hear you right now. One more shot. Okay, Patty, I pulled you out. See if you can reload, try again. Back to talking about Kobe Tracy for Idaho State. So, Kobe Tracy was not the starting quarterback for your Bengals. He was not the guy that we would have talked about preseason. That quarterback was Jordan Cook. Jordan Cook, the junior this season, so sophomore last year, Idaho State split quarterback duties with Hunter Hayes and Jordan Cook last year. But Jordan Cook was, generally speaking, understood as the starter. Patty, I'm going to throw you in one more time. We'll see how this works. Patty, are you there? All right, Patty, we got nothing. We got nothing. So I don't know if you need to kill where you're at. But now, Patty, can you say something? Okay, I got to just keep rolling. So, Jordan Cook, started last season, started this season as well. The book, essentially the background on Jordan Cook is very, very good arm talent for days, but could be a little bit erratic. And with how much Idaho State throws the ball, that team, if the Bengals are not connecting when they're passing the way they do, it's just a sprint to 3 and out, and their defense lives on the field. That's the problem. So why am I talking about Kobe Tracy? Well, Kobe Tracy was not penciled in as a starter in any publication whatsoever. Kobe Tracy is a transfer to Idaho State from Utah Tech. He's a senior, and look, he didn't play a ton. Actually, rephrase. In 2023, played a decent amount, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 420 pass attempts. So, hey, I take it back. Did have some good play at Utah Tech. So, the question, though, for Idaho State is, hey, why did Kobe Tracy play? Because Jordan Cook struggled. 9 of 20, 71 yards, threw a pick. Kobe Tracy comes in, goes 9 of 14, 114 yards, threw a touchdown, which is to say, like that's a pretty solid outing against Oregon State for an Idaho State type quarterback. So the intrigue now, and hey, I'm stealing this from McLean Westbrook, the godfather of Jungle Land podcast. Kobe Tracy looked like he should be the starter for Idaho State based off how he played against Oregon State. Final score, Oregon State wins 38-15. So, look, hey, obviously it went downhill from the 9-7 end of first quarter league for the Bengals. But other development, Bengals did get a little bit more production on the ground. 16 rushes for 82 yards is not – look, that's not going to lead the big sky or anything, but considering how little this team rushed the ball last year, 16 rushes for 82 yards, and that factors in sacks as well. Not that bad. The rushes were split pretty evenly across the board for Idaho State. Kiowa Cowie II led Idaho State with 4 rushes for 39 yards. Yeah, you heard that. 4 rushes, 39 yards. Patty, one more time. I'm going to add you. Just start talking if you're there. And I got no Patty there, so we're going to just keep rolling. But intrigue in Idaho State. Do we have a new starting quarterback? Are they going to have a little bit of a run game? It looks like that could be the case this season. Moving on from Idaho State, number 8, Northern Arizona. They played Lincoln. I don't care about Northern Arizona playing Lincoln. I just don't. I'm going to give this no attention. Northern Arizona won because Lincoln is, we still don't know what, allegedly they're from California. It was 66-6, NAU won. I'm not going to talk about this at all, except to let you know the leading passer for Northern Arizona was Ty Pennington. I'm done talking about this game. Moving on from Northern Arizona. And hey, I told you guys, I'm going to try to not be flippant with talking about some of the teams this season. I will be flippant when we're talking sub D1 games. I just don't care. I have to get this. I'm trying to get these things done in close to 30-ish minutes. I don't care about the sub D1 games. There's just not a prayer I'm going to care. So moving up from number 8, Northern Arizona, we've got number 7, Weber State. Weber State had a rough week because they were supposed to. Weber State traveled to Seattle to play if you're Sean Kramer, founder of Tubbs the Club website, traveled to play the University of Washington Huskies. And this was 35-3 Washington win, just like it's supposed to be. If you're a little bit maybe thing to be mildly concerned about, Richie Munoz, starting quarterback for Weber State. And by the way, hey, Max Antouche, no problem that you're late, dude. I made virtually no announcement that this was going to be playing at all. Okay, Patty, this is your official last chance. I've added you. Just start talking if you are here, Patty.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Okay, Patty, we've had like 15 interruptions getting this situated, so we're just going to talk. I'm talking Weber State, that lost to University of Washington. They got murdered 35-3 like you're supposed to. So 2 big takeaways. One, Richie Munoz goes 11-32 for 98 yards. Richie Munoz looked good as a starting quarterback for Weber State last season, took over about halfway through for Kylan Weiser. Weber State was a different team when Munoz took over. do you care that Munoz went 11 for 32 against UW?
I think it's hard to be too harsh on Munoz. That UW secondary looked really good, and they had a tough time getting any separation, the Weber receivers, from what I saw. I have a tough time giving them too much, or I have a hard time punishing them too much in the polls, but they did not look great offensively overall. And, I mean, their fronts just did not look great, or at least their offensive line did not look great. But they did drop a few spots for me personally, but I can't be too harsh on them. They are playing UW.
Okay. The positive offensive takeaway I'd say is, hey, Damon Bankson, running back, missed more than half a season last year with injury. When he's healthy, he's all Big Sky level talent. He goes 16 carries for 105 yards. That's promising, which the takeaway here is, hey, it looks like Damon Bankson is up to 100%. And if that's the case, that's going to matter for Weber State. Thing to pay attention to defensively for Weber, they've got maybe the best edge combo in the Big Sky between Braden Wilson and Kamari Bailey. Kamari Bailey, Idaho transfer. Both those guys came up with 5 tackles. So 10 total. 9 of those tackles between Braden Wilson and Kamari Bailey were solo tackles with Bailey picking up a sack. So I think Weber's going to be pretty damn good in the front 7. I just think that's going to cause problems for a lot of the league. Just not going to be able to see that against University of Washington. Next team we're going to move on to, Patty. And hey, we're low tech because I was way behind schedule, guys. So we moved on from Weber State. Patty, we're going to rely on you here. Number 6, Eastern Washington. What happened to Eastern Washington? Picked up a big FCS win. Eastern Washington. Well, Patty, were you at the game?
I was at the game.
Okay. Eastern beats Monmouth 42-27 in Cheney. Just a couple stats to hit out really quick, Patty, before we get your game takeaways. Kekoa Vesperis, damn, great outing. 25-28, 275 yards, 5 touchdowns. Astonishing that's not Big Sky Player of the Week. Tuna Alta here on the ground, 16 rushes, 108 yards. And in the receiving room, Efton Chisholm III, my God, 12 catches, 173 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, Patty, I want you to answer 2 things at once. One, no one has questioned Eastern offensively. Honestly, I think they should be better this season with Vesperis having some more experience under his legs. I would call Kiko Vesperis the best returning quarterback in the Big Sky. Question is, defensively, Eastern was just atrocious, especially against the run last season, somehow worse than Cal Poly in 2023. Tell us what you saw real quick offensively, but big deal defensively.
Offensively, that was amazing. I have not seen Eastern clicking on all cylinders like that in what it feels like a couple of years. They looked really good. Kikoa was great. He had something like 3 or 4 incompletions, and 2 of those were drops. Like, he was making it happen. I was very impressed with him. A little bit underrated on the offensive side of things. The offensive line really stepped up. They last year, they were supposed to be a very good offensive line, and they were kind of, I would say, middle of the pack offensive line-wise. They looked really good on a Thursday night, and I think that's going to be very important for this Eagle offense. Now, defensively, I am very excited. Eastern did not look atrocious on the defensive side of the ball. Through 3 quarters, Eastern held Monmouth just to 14 points. On the game, they held them to something like 45 yards rushing. Sonny Ento is a guy that he was on, I believe, like the Shrine Bowl preseason watch list. He was held to something like 2 yards a carry, 3 yards a carry. I was pretty damn impressed with the Eastern run defense. There's a few things with their miscommunication type things in the fourth quarter that led to Monmouth making a few big plays, over the top of that Eastern defense, attacking the secondary. But that was the strength of this Eastern team a few years ago, or last year, really. I mean, it was a middle of the pack passing defense, but I have faith that unit is going to be able to be pretty good. DeJean Wells, cornerback number 3, had a very nice game playing corner there, but overall pretty dang excited about Eastern defense. I wouldn't pit them as like a top Big Sky defense or anything like that, but I do think that their front has made a huge step from what I've seen over the spring, this fall, and now into a game. I think Eastern is probably run defense wise going to be middle of the pack-ish. and you got to hope that the secondary steps it up next week. But overall, I think Eastern's a very improved team defensively, and we'll just have to see when they play some, higher level competition, because we gotta put the buffer on there. Monmouth won 4 games last year. All 4 wins were against teams that were below 500. So we'll see once we start playing some, higher level competition. But overall, really optimistic about Eastern.
Yeah, hey, with some of these better teams, we'll talk about their next week for 1 second too. Eastern's going to be 2-0 after the first 2 weeks. They host Drake next week. So, Patty, you were correct. Eastern gave up 2.3 yards per rush against Monmouth. So, hey, grain of salt, week 1, team that's not that great doesn't mean this is an elite defense. But the small sample size we're working with, Eastern was atrocious defensively. They just need to be okay to be looking like a potential playoff team. That's what we saw this week. Moving up from Eastern, UC Davis comes in at number 5. And UC Davis, look, they hung tough with Cal for a while. Cal and Davis do play relatively regularly. This was at halftime. This was a 14-13 game with Davis trailing by 1. Here's kind of what undid Davis. Miles Hastings threw 3 picks, went 24-48 for 221 yards, threw 3 interceptions. On the ground, Big Sky preseason offensive player of the year, Land Larison, 17 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown. In the receiving room, Davis is led by CJ Hutton, 7 catches for 68 yards. And again, of course, no touchdowns because Miles Hastings threw a touchdown to the wrong team, to former Idaho cornerback Marcus Harris. But 31-13. Now, not to be harsh on Davis, a lot of these Power 5 Big Sky games, when they're tight, relatively speaking, they're tight for a half, and then the Power 5 talent wins out in the second half. That's exactly what happened here. Patty, quick takeaways for you on UC Davis.
Yeah, this one was definitely a tale of 2 halves. Hastings looked pretty damn good in that first half, and then in the second half, he did not look like the same player. But I mean, hey, FCS versus FBS, run out of gas. That's understandable.
Pause real quick. So essentially, you're saying the first half we got 2022 Miles Hastings. In the second half, we got 2023 Miles Hastings.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I thought I saw. And I think what kind of changed there is Davis's O-line. I mean, they didn't look great the entire game, but that first half, they were at least giving Hastings some time. He had pressure in his face, but a little bit of time. And that second half, they were just Cal was able to kind of tee off and really get to Hastings, and Hastings just started panicking, throwing bad picks and stuff like that. That was the biggest change I saw overall. But defensively for Davis, I thought their linebacking core looked pretty dang good that first half. I believe David Meyer is his name, had a really nice game, that linebacker number 9. He's going to be a guy to watch out for this year, as well as Rex Connors had a pretty solid game coming up and tackling in the box. I believe Cal had one of the leading running backs coming back that led the Pac-12 in rushing or something like that. For a half, they held him relatively in check. I think they're a team with a lot of promise. My question mark right now for them is really the offensive and defensive line. I think if they're a team that if that offensive and defensive line looks better in Big Sky play, they're going to be really dang good. But, if those lines aren't amazing, I think that will be kind of their limiting factor, as well as Hastings just has to play well. We got to see 2022 Hastings. We can't see 2023 Hastings. One other note, CJ Hutton looked really good in that first half. I think he's going to be a name to watch out for in the Big Sky as well.
Okay. To hit UC Davis glass half full, if you're a Davis fan, O-line was fine for a half against Cal. If you can be fine for a half against Cal, there's a lot of FCS teams you're going to be okay against. And hey, defensively, just to bring up what you said, linebacker David Meyer, 12 tackles on the game, 7 solo. Rex Connors, 11 tackles, 4 solo. Moving up next from Davis, we've got Sacramento State, who, hey, we don't really talk about pole position. I think that's the most boring discussion that we can possibly have is pole jockeying. A little surprised at Sac State at number 4, but hey, the votes are the votes. So what happened for Sac State? Well, Sac State was competitive against San Jose State on Thursday for most of the games. Honestly, actually, Sacramento State led for a very good chunk of this game before succumbing 42-24 in San Jose. So at halftime, Sacramento State led this game 17-14. End of third quarter, they lead it 24-21 and then just get blitzed 21-0 in the third quarter. Some of the intrigue here, look, we're not trying to only talk quarterback guys on each team, but quarterback is something that's all over the place in the Big Sky right now. For the most part, Sac State rolled with Caden Bennett, starter for most of last season. He went 17-32 for 134 yards, but threw 2 picks. The big deal with Bennett is in the Big Sky, he's a good runner. He's fast. He's not a power runner, but he's fast. 10 rushes for 22 yards on this game. Carson Conklin, more of the pure passer quarterback that Sacramento State has, who played about 4 or 5 games last season, went 4 of 9 for 45 yards, threw 1 touchdown. On the ground, Sac State was led by Elijah Tolliver, 22 carries, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But for the maybe most famous, top receiving target, Anderson Grover, 5 catches, 64 yards. For the Big Sky Podcast Networks and Tubbs, you're a Tubbs Club Discord member. I don't care what school you're going to. If one of the big Sac State doubters on the season, Patty, did this game change your impression of Sacramento State in any way?
I think partially. So the main thing with Sac State is I just didn't know what they were going to do at quarterback. I was worried that they're going to try to do the 2 quarterback system and really kill momentum. Well, they did that, and it looked okay, but it was a little hairy. I don't know, man. My biggest question is, that first half, Sac State was able to run the ball at will on San Jose State. Their offensive line looked great. And then they kind of got away from that in the second half. And my big question is, I feel like they got a little bit of identity finding to do. I think if they can find that identity, they're going to be a pretty dang good team. But I think that's the big question. I think quarterback is going to be their limiting factor overall, though. We got to see Caden Bennett be more consistent, or we got to see Conklin be more consistent. That's the big thing for Sac State for me.
Yeah, I mean, Sac State gave up 5. They turned the ball over 5 times this game. Caden Bennett accounting for 3 of those, 2 picks and a lost fumble. Bennett did have 2 fumbles on the game, so that obviously matters. Honestly, my take from what I hear, Patty, and from when I pay attention to this game, the takeaway for Sac State is similar to this takeaway for UC Davis of, look, the O-line strength, you completely saw how that could matter in the majority of the FCS season. But look, Caden Bennett he's a bit of an erratic passer, and he's just going to have to be a little more solid on this show. He was famous to me for being a guy who you could watch him. You knew he was talented. He would make plays, but he's going to make 5 or 6 throws a game where you're thinking, good God, what are you trying to do here? Who was that supposed to be to? And I think with his legs, if head coach Andy Thompson had confidence that he was the guy, he just would be the guy. So I think this quarterback story is not going to go away, especially if you're going to have Bennett, throwing for 4.2 yards per pass. Hey, did Conklin light the world on fire? Otherwise, no, but only got 9 reps. So, hey, that's the thing to pay attention to as we head into the rest of the season. Sacramento State next week is going to travel to Fresno State. So should be 0-2 after that. From Sac State, now, hey, this is a curveball to me. I did not think this would happen. And had we recorded or had the voting been cast prior to the news out of Idaho, which we will talk to, I don't think we'd have this team here. Montana comes in at number 3. What Montana do this week? Well, the Griz looked like they tried to lose against not that great Missouri State football team. Patty, Missouri State is leaving for Conference USA next year, correct?
Yep. I think it is next year. They're starting their transition next year, I believe, is how it works. Maybe I might be wrong, but I think so.
Look, on paper, a win over Missouri Valley football team is typically good news, but Man, the Griz sometimes start out slow. We saw this last season. The Griz started last year out slow, but hey, built momentum, and they were the national runner-ups. So this game, 29-24 Montana wins, but the result was in doubt all the way through. The big question heading into the year, again, maybe we should just call this the quarterback episode, Patty. New starting quarterback from Montana, Kealili Ayat, son of former Griz great Brian Ayat. He's a starter. A lot of fans understood Ayat was going to be the starter, or believed he would be the starter heading into this year. A lot of confidence in small sample size in 2023. Ayat looked like he had talent to play. With the huge asterisk, I just think everyone needs to have this asterisk next to any young quarterback playing for Montana. Bobby Hauck, one of the most successful coaches in the history of Big Sky. So this isn't meant as a critique of the dude because the team finished second in the nation last year. Just famously, he's never really developed a quarterback. And Ayat, redshirt freshman, this is a classic case of can the dude develop? Well, goes 9 of 19 for 90 yards. In the postgame, Hauck said he had planned on giving Fresno State transfer Logan Fife some run in the second half anyway, but Hauck is famous for really having no tolerance for lost fumbles. And Ayat lost a fumble, then Logan Fife came in, and Logan Fife was steady, 5 of 7 for 90 yards, threw a touchdown pass as well, kind of righted the ship for the Griz. And that's kind of the big intrigue story-wise. I mean, yardage-wise, this game, it was pretty even, but 29-24, the game should be pretty even overall. Patty, before I throw it to you, just the thing for the Griz, they have the ball for 23 minutes. I know they scored 29 points, but offensively that's to me the limiting factor for Montana potentially year in and year out, because no matter who turns over defensively as players, Bobby Hauck is pretty damn good at putting together a defense. What'd you see from Montana?
I think they're a pretty similar team to last year, early in the year. Last year, they had a similar kind of quarterback controversy, I guess you could say, where you have two guys that are, I don't know if they're very different skill set wise this year, but two guys where it seems like you have about half your fan base is in favor of one and about half your fan base is in favor of the other. I personally liked what I saw from Ayat, but then the fumble happened and we did not see him again. So I think that's going to be kind of an ongoing issue here for the next few weeks. And I mean, they don't really have a break. They got North Dakota next week, who's a ranked team. They got Western Carolina the following week, who is another really good ranked team that took NC State to the wire, I believe, this week. So they got to figure some things out offensively. But, I mean, a huge asterisk, Junior Bergen did not play in this game. And he is kind of one of their X factors on that offense. Very talented offense either way. But I think the big difference in this game is in the second half, Montana got the running game going pretty well. And I think that's part of why they ended up winning this game. On the flip side, defensively, I mean, Montana's defense is going to be good. I think the issue I think this comes with their 3-3-5 being so aggressive at how they play defenses. Missouri State did a pretty good job taking advantage of the aggressiveness. They did a really good job with little, draws, little screens, and swing routes out to the flats. That's how they got a lot of their yards. I got to think if teams can get the ball out on the edge and avoid the blitzing, I don't know if this Montana secondary is quite the level that they were last year in terms of open field tackling and stuff like that. And so I think the Griz defense has taken just half a tip down. They're still nasty. They can still get to the quarterback, which we saw in that fourth quarter when, the game's in doubt and they had 3 sacks in a row. That defense is still really good, but I think there's just a tiny bit of vulnerability there.
Yeah, stat correction. Ayat did not lose his fumble, but he did fumble. And from that point on, Ayat did not play. Will say, last season, Montana, on the year, they eventually figured it out offensively. I just think that this is a team that's going to probably, like last season, take a while to figure it out offensively. One minor correction, too. Patty, I agree with the premise of quarterback might be unclear. Although, hey, if I'm a gambling man, if Fife came in, did what he was supposed to. I'd expect he's going to be the starter. The fan base loves Ayotte. The fan base was all in on Ayotte. Logan Fife was just kind of a transfer based off my understanding of the Montana fan base. But we got two other teams to talk about. Before we talk about those other two teams, first, show sponsor Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. Look, it doesn't matter which Snake River whiskey you grab, whether you're talking about the entry level Snake River Stampede or their small batch 1915 edition. You can't go wrong. Both are 3-grain whiskeys, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. Both have double barrel finishing. Your Snake River Stampede is ex-bourbon, then ex-Oloroso sherry casks. Your 1950 ex-bourbon, then ex-Canadian rye whiskey casks. Both are fantastic whiskeys. Both are great buys. They have that the almost perfect intersection in Idaho State liquor stores of cost to price. It's a good bargain, but it's a good bargain for a good whiskey. Grab a Snake River Stampede today. Number 2, Idaho Vandals. The Idaho Vandals made $740,000 in a scheduled loss to Oregon, which was a loss. The Vandals go down 24-14. The story of this game, though, is this game was in doubt the entire way through, pretty much until last couple minutes of the game. Idaho's down 14-0 at the end of the first half, but they look in the second half off a Jack Lane 4-yard run. Idaho in the fourth quarter, 9 minutes 45 seconds left in the fourth quarter, is 14-17. Oregon leading. And I think everyone who paid attention to this game, if you're a Vandal, you were thinking, okay, look, Idaho's not going to win this game, but good God, we might win this game. If you're an Oregon fan, you're just shitting your pants. If you are a Big Sky fan, you were both stoked and kind of devastated to see this, because Idaho, the outside of Moscow narrative on Idaho was, hey, they lost all their offensive talent. What are they going to do? Well, what they're going to do is have maybe the best defense in the Big Sky. Look, I mean, they got sacked Oregon 3 times. Look, Patty, you are someone who I want to hear talk about the Idaho defense, but to me, that's the story. The first story of this game we'll talk about is Idaho defensively. Look, we had Keyshawn James Newby on the edge picking up 2 sacks, 6 tackles, 5 solo total, 2.5 tackles for loss. We also had Jackson Eck, linebacker, redshirt. Jackson's a redshirt freshman, correct? Or did he burn an eligibility year last season, Patty?
I think he burned his eligibility year. I think he'll be
okay. So sophomore Jackson X starting at middle line. Yeah, he's sophomore, starting at middle linebacker, 14 tackles, including 9 solo tackles. So look, one of the weaknesses of Idaho last season was tackling itself. There were certainly moments in this game where I think you left this game thinking, okay, we're Big Sky play, this looks like a team that's bringing it more defensively than they did last season. Now, the downside for Idaho is, look, the team essentially had 2 big drives to get their points, which that happens when you're talking about playing a very good FBS team as a Big Sky school. But look, the offense didn't light the world on fire, because they shouldn't. If Idaho's going to win this game, they're going to win it 21-17, something like that. So I just understood that. It's a grain of salt. But new redshirt sophomore starting quarterback Jack Lane, in his first start against a good team, goes 11 for 25, 168 yards, threw a touchdown and a pick, also rushed for a touchdown, but broke his collarbone in the fourth quarter. He's out optimistically until towards the end of the season, if he can play. Jack Wagner came in relief, threw 2 passes, 1 was a pick. We'll talk about Jack Wagner as an impact player more on the main show, Tubs at the Club, but spoiler alert, he's a stronger rusher than Lane, but certainly not as good passer. Patty, your takeaways from Oregon, Idaho?
Yeah, that Idaho defense is going to be one of the best in the country, I believe. They looked very good, and this has kind of been something that I've been banging the drum for since last spring. Like, these guys looked really good last spring, and it's spring football. That's kind of, you expect your defense to look better, but man, Jackson was covering a lot of ground, and that's ground he was not covering as a freshman. You think of a guy like Isaiah King, who was playing that Sam Backer role. We didn't really see him last season, and he had a really nice game. Tommy McCormick was flying around making plays. One of the big developments as well is Andrew Marshall. He's a younger corner who just looked like a lockdown corner in this game. I think this Idaho defense is probably one of the top, I'd say top 5 in the country, in my opinion. I think this front is one of the best in the country. But they're going to be carrying a lot of load this year with so much talent leaving Idaho offensively. You know, I don't know how much production you're going to get there. So I think if there was a defense that's going to be able to shoulder that load, it's going to be this Idaho defense, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Hey, Sean Kramer in the comments section. Game plan was keep everything in front and make tackles, give them underneath stuff, make them convert third down. Worked beautifully. Sean, thanks for that. So, Patty, I'm going to rephrase what you said offensively. The question for Idaho offensively is the O-line going to make big enough strides this year to overcome the fact that some of the best playmakers in the Big Sky no longer suit up in Moscow? This one game, there's no prayer anyone was going to have an answer based off this game. Oregon gave up 16.5 points per game last season. I know they're understood as an offensive power just reputationally, but what Dan Lanning's doing in Oregon, they play defense too, guys. This is easily the best defense Idaho's going to see the entire season. Their O-line should have looked like it struggled. But I do think it's fair to say we didn't see in this game enough from the O-line to say, like, oh, well, clearly the questions about the O-line are ones we can put to bed. I think that's still going to be the case. And now we have a new quarterback in Moscow. I know the attitude in Moscow, just like it would be at University of Montana, just like at Montana State, is, hey, next man up. Patty, you've described Jack Wagner's rushing style as relatively similar to Sean Chambers from Montana State last year, in that he's going to try to run through you. He's not going to try to run around you. Real question, though, is Jack Wagner's not going behind the O-line that Sean Chambers went behind in Bozeman last season. So will that rush-heavy attack be able to buy Idaho enough production to give that defense some rest so that they're fresh the whole game? Not sure, but the glass half full side is maybe Idaho with a running quarterback or a quarterback who can run a bit more. And Wagner still has an arm. He's just shown he's not yet accurate. Coming out of spring football, there was no discussion in Moscow about, hey, is Jack Wagner going to be a starter? And it was not an accident, but the dude has an arm. Maybe an extra blocker with more quarterback runs is going to matter more for a team like Idaho than someone else. Don't know. But that means, hey, number one team that we have to talk about, the now 2-0 Montana State Bobcats. I'm going to talk about the fact of 2 games because we didn't record last week, but we're really just going to focus on this one, the one from this week. Last week, Montana State beat New Mexico in New Mexico 35-31 in a game that the Bobcats should have won by 20. What kept New Mexico in the game was 2 Tommy Mellott fumbles returned for touchdowns. This week, Montana State traveled to Utah Tech, had no trouble with the Trailblazers. The Bobcats walk away 31-7. Tommy Mellott, 14-21 for 152 yards and a touchdown. But the story for Montana State is always on the ground. This week, the team rushes 56 times for 329 yards and 3 touchdowns. So talent left, just like it always does. Look, in college football, talent turns over, but now in the FCS, you're going to have talent turnover if you're good based off of transfers. The early returns are, this doesn't really matter for Montana State. Rushed for 5.9 yards per rush against Utah Tech. And of course, last week against New Mexico on the ground, Montana State, that was a team that was down last week, 3 starting O-linemen and a team that was down their top running back, still rushed 47 times for 362 yards. So that's just what this team is going to do. They're going to pass enough. Look, Mellott can throw the ball. You just don't want Mellott throwing 35 times a game and that being what you rely on. You want him throwing more in the 20-ish range. They're going to just beat the hell out of you on the ground, and they play some defense. So, Patty, your takeaway on Montana State?
You know, the big question with Montana State for me coming out of that week 0 win for them was I wasn't mega impressed with their defense's ability to tackle. And that question was totally erased for me in this Utah Tech game. Now, Utah Tech may not have quite the skill position in the running back type of guys that you're going to see in the Big Sky. But I think that Montana State defense definitely showed that, hey, they are a good defense. They can tackle. They're a good unit. That was my biggest concern is, like, I was getting flashbacks to that Brawl of the Wild game in 2023 where Montana State could not tackle a soul. And it looked like they fixed that issue. Offensively for them, it's Montana State. They look like Montana State. They're going to run the ball a lot. Tommy Malotte's going to run the ball a lot. He's probably going to end up coming off the field at some point with some sort of, nick up. That's kind of what we've seen. I think he had a cramp issue this week, but the big question for them is Tommy going to be able to stay healthy? I think that's what we're all wondering.
Now, the pushback that a Bobcat would give you is that, hey, against Utah Tech, Malotte rushed 6 total times, and 2 of them were for touchdowns. So, I think the early returns are that Vegan is gonna try to have Malotte rush just a little bit less this season. So in 2 games, he's rushed 15 times. 3 of them were touchdowns. So I think that's the direction Vegan's trying to move there. But hey, Patty, before we get to the close and talk just for a second about the week to come, got to talk about show sponsor Hughes River Expedition. Look, if you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you on a vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway. Check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish on the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring your clothes, let HRE handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Patty, if you look in that private chat, I sent you a link for the upcoming games this week. So couple notes of intrigue to me are, look, I'm a Vandal, so that's always going to be there. But Idaho at Wyoming. Wyoming got their ass kicked against Arizona State in week 1, 48-7. But Idaho, and so just on paper, with how Idaho did against Oregon, before you heard Jack Lane was down, you got to say this game was circled as, could this be yet another Big Sky over Mountain West upset? What games are you paying attention to this week?
Obviously, that Idaho-Wyoming game, I think, is going to be a big one for Idaho just to see where they are with Jack Wagner at quarterback. The other one that I'm really interested in is Montana going down to North Dakota. North Dakota is a team that usually plays pretty well at home. Montana looked a little shaky. I'm just interested to see how that game goes. North Dakota has been known to knock off teams that are perceived to be much better than them up there in, North Grand Forks, North Dakota. So that's one I have on my radar. I don't know if North Dakota is a great team per se. I also think Sac State at Fresno State could be one that's interesting for the Big Sky. Just seeing how Sac State looks against, a talented team like Fresno State. Fresno State, hey, they played Eastern really close last year. Eastern probably should have beat them last year. So I'm curious to see. I really want to see what that quarterback room looks like versus a good team like Fresno State. Those are my main 2 that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, other games of note. We have, and honestly, this one stands out to me more than I would have thought before we started the show. We do have Big Sky Conference play begins next week. Portland State at Weber State. Mostly because, hey, if a team's playing a conference game this early, it means they have a non-conference game later in the year. So that'll just be swapped. But Portland State at Weber State, first Big Sky Conference game. It's more to me with how Munoz really struggled against University of Washington. I expect he's going to look good against Portland State, but hey, we actually got to see it. And look, hey, Montana State could easily walk into 3-0. They host Maine. I do want to piggyback off what you said with Montana at North Dakota. North Dakota lost 21-3 to Iowa State, but that means nothing because that's supposed to be a blowout game for Iowa State. That's why it's booked in the first place. North Dakota was a playoff level team last season. I'd say if Montana has an effort like they had in week 1, then that is certainly on the road a losable game. But Montana, look, I'm just not going to overreact to Montana playing a team early and looking a little bit off, because I think I don't think they know what their offensive identity is. Last season, that's where Montana picked up their loss. I think it's probably going to take 3 or 4 weeks before the Griz know for a fact who they are. That said, guys, hey, thanks for tuning in. Everyone in the comment section, Dane Moon saying for Idaho, now it's time to kick Wyoming ass. Sean Kramer, Idaho defensive body language was so amazing. They savored every single ability to make a play. Thanks, Sean. And James Jacobs, excited to see how Idaho's defense is going to stack up against the Cats rushing attack. Hey, support the show, patreon.com/Tubbs at the club. Helps us keep the lights on, helps keep my whiskey cabinet full too. And we'll be back next week at some point. Recording schedule for the show is just going to be chaotic. I have no way to fix that. Patty, thanks for hopping on. And until next week, go Vandals, right, Patty?
I'm saying go Eags because I'm in Cheney and I'm go Eags, man. I'm sorry. Go Eags.
Go Eags. Okay, well, we'll see you guys late Sunday night. That's when these are going to pretty much be recorded. I am going to go and try to find some button to push to eventually end the show. See you guys next week.
And annoy me.